This is the last lecture for historical geology, and you need to watch these videos, especially those who aren't doing good in the class. I'm getting the feeling that the ones who are getting A's and working hard are watching all these videos, and the ones who aren't doing well aren't watching these videos. It's your chance to bring your grade up, and I hope you really watch these videos. The video 15, 16, 17, and this is video 18. I'm going to get a review sheet to you by Thursday night. Maybe earlier if I can. Chapter 19. The last chapter in your book is about primate and human evolution. What is a primate? A primate is a monkey, an ape, or a hominid. What is a hominid? A hominid is all different kinds of humans, both extinct forms and us, Homo sapiens. At the moment, there's only one type of hominid existing, and that's Homo sapiens. But we're going to talk about ancient hominids as well. Paleoanthropologists, they study, one of the things they study is they study the history of the human race. We're going to be taking a look at what the fossil evidence suggests. So, here's some different primates. You got monkeys and apes in this picture, but hominids are also primates. In the upper left, you see a small monkey. It's called a tessier. And it belongs to a type of monkey called a prosimy. And I'm going to spell that for you. Prosimi. The prosimy are the most primitive of all the primates. Look at its big eyes and its 5 toes. Look, and it lives in trees. Remember what we said? An animal that lives in trees, what do we call it? We call it an arboreal animal. It's arboreal. It's also nocturnal. On the right, upper right here is a baboon. A baboon is a type of monkey. We call it an old world monkey. And we're going to take a look at the difference between old world monkeys like this baboon and new world monkeys like this spider monkey. In the lower right, you have an ape, a chimpanzee. No one is closer in terms of DNA to us than chimpanzees. Their DNA is 99.7% the same as ours. So we have a prosimy, an old world monkey, a new world monkey, and an ape in this picture. They're all primates. Let's first talk about the prosimians. Prosimians are, that's the plural for prosimy. Prosimians are the most primitive of all the primates. They typically have very large eyes. Why do they have such large eyes? It's because they're nocturnal. They need to get in as much moonlight as possible so that they can hunt their prey. They have 5 digits on their hands, used to grasp tree limbs so they stay up in the trees. They're arboreal. They have nails and claws. They're omnivores, meaning that they eat plants and animals. Some prosimy have these kinds of tails called prehensile tails, which they can use to grasp branches so that if they lose their footing, they'll still stay in the tree. They won't fall down. Sometimes there's hundreds of feet up in the air, so that prehensile tail saves them from a big fall. Most primitive of all of the primates is the prosimy. Today, they're only found in tropical regions, Asia, India, Africa, and Madagascar. They're usually small in body size, prosimians. Now we're going to talk about anthropoids. And what are anthropoids? Anthropoids are old world, new world monkeys. Old world monkeys, like the baboon, new world monkeys, like the spider monkey, and a chimpanzee, which is an ape. Let's first take a look at the second most primitive of the monkeys. We are going to look at the New World monkeys. The New World monkeys are more advanced in terms of brain size, for example, and the ability to socialize in a group, to be able to think. These are some New World monkeys. They're much more intelligent than prosimi. Notice that most of them stay up in the trees. They're arboreal. They are arboreal. But they're not nocturnal anymore. Their eyes are smaller than the prosimi. See this mother carrying a baby on her back? Look at the prehensile tail they have. The prehensile tail of these is used to stay up in the trees. They have these long, strong muscles in their tails. These are the New World monkeys. These are quite intelligent. When I was in Germany, I saw a man who had trained a monkey. He had dressed up this monkey like a human being. And he could go around with a metal cup in his hands and beg for money. He understood certain words that his owner was telling him. He knew how to make people happy by smiling. He knew how to dance a little bit. These are New World monkeys. Now let's take a look at some more advanced primates, the Old World monkeys. Okay, I always like this one here. Look at this Old World monkey. Let's see if I can get a picture of this. I think this is called proboscis. Let me get a picture. This is quite an unusual Old World monkey. This is called proboscis. And notice that it looks different than the New World monkeys. It's left the trees. It can walk on the ground. And it's got a long nose. So I always find them quite interesting looking. Let's take a look at some other Old World monkeys. We have, these are called drills, D-R-I-L-L-S. And these are mandrills here. Notice that they've lost their tail. They lost the strong tail to stay in the trees. They got a much smaller, weaker tail, or they have no tail at all. They walk on the ground. Notice that their nostrils point downwards. Unlike the New World monkeys where the nostrils are widely spaced. They have more complex social gatherings. They move in troops with an alpha male and an alpha female. They communicate with different sounds. They're more intelligent. They have a larger brain than the New World monkeys. New World monkeys are incredibly intelligent. Now let's take a look at apes. There's 3 kinds of apes you need to remember. Remember, apes are not monkeys. They are much more intelligent than monkeys, and they have they're not tied to the trees at all. Let's take a look at the first one. We talked about chimpanzees. These are probably the most intelligent of all of the apes. Complex social behavior with alpha males and alpha females. They can even use tools. They can pick up sticks and dig ants out of anthills. They can use sticks to fight. They show affection to humans who raise them in zoos. And they can learn even to read certain words. Incredibly intelligent. They can walk upright sometimes. They kiss. These are chimpanzees, the most intelligent of all the apes, and their DNA is closer to ours than any other species on the planet. Second type of ape that you need to know about is a gorilla. The gorilla is the strongest of all the primates by far. A human being could crush a human being's arm like a twig. 10 Mike Tysons would get killed very quickly by one of these apes. Extremely strong, called gorillas. They have complex social behavior, mothering instinct, fathering instinct. They can stand upright sometimes, but they walk on their knuckles most of the time. They beat on their chest to show aggression. They can show compassion to those who have cared for them, including humans who have raised them. Next type of ape that you need to know about is the orangutans. The orangutans look like this. Their fur is different color. It's an orangey color. Again, they have very large brains compared to monkeys. Complex social behavior. They stay on the ground most of the time, but they can swing on tree limbs and vines. Notice one thing about the apes, though. They have no tail. The tail is gone. So on the test, there might be a picture of a prosimy or an ape or an old world monkey or a new world monkey, and you need to know the difference between them. You also need to know what a prosimy is the most primitive of the primates. And there's 3 kinds of anthropoids. But we have the old world monkeys, the new world monkeys, and the apes. Notice the difference here. New world monkey has a prehensile tail used to stay up in the trees. It's arboreal. It has a flat face and widely separated nostrils. Now let's look at the old world monkeys. The nostrils point downwards. A non-prehensile tail. It doesn't need to stay up in the trees. Tail smaller, weaker. It hangs around on the ground and it troops. So here you can see the difference between the way a human or hominid walks and the way a ape walks. Hominids or humans walk upright, whereas apes, they can stand upright, but they walk on their knuckles. Let's take a look at the difference between a monkey and an ape and a human brain. Here's a New World monkey brain, here's an ape brain, and here's a human brain. First thing you might notice is that they have the same structure. They have a frontal lobe, a parietal lobe, a temporal lobe, a cerebellum, and a occipital lobe. Now, the big difference is, obviously, humans have a bigger brain, have more intelligence than apes. Apes are more intelligent than New World monkeys. The other difference, but noting that difference in size is important, but also notice they have the same features in their brains. It's just a difference in size. The reason why they have the same features is because they are somehow related to one another. That doesn't mean, as some people say, that we evolved from apes. What it means is that apes and humans have a common ancestor. And we haven't found that common ancestor yet. Some people think that we have fragments of bones of it. But if they had evolved separately, then the structure of their brains would be different. The fact that the structure of their brains is the same means they're related in some way. Now let's talk about hominids, humans. Humans appeared separated from the apes through a common ancestor about 7 million years ago. There used to be this huge debate about where did the human race come from. Back in the 19th century and the 18th century, scientists in Europe and Asia and the Middle East thought that maybe the human race began in Europe or Asia or the Middle East. Well, they were all wrong. All of the data, almost all of the data indicates that humans began in Africa. We all came from Africa. In fact, the DNA clearly shows that every woman alive came from the same woman who lived in Africa 100,000 years ago. Some people call this woman Eve. Y chromosome DNA analysis indicates that men came from the same man in Africa 100,000 years ago. Some people call him Adam. Let's take a look at the first hominid. And we need to remember that the oldest hominids that we know of, that we have a reasonable number of fossils for, are called, I'm going to spell it for you, Australopithecines. Okay, there's the spelling for you, Australopithecines. Let's take a look at what they look like. These are the first hominids, the first hominids that existed. As far we have large amount of bones, they're called Australopithecines. They walked upright. All hominids walk upright, unlike apes who walk on their knuckles. Obviously, this doesn't look like a modern human. It has a lot of primitive traits, such as eyebrow ridges, a jutting jaw, hair all over its body. We first found these in Africa, and well, we've only found them in Africa, by the Leakey family. They're a husband and wife, and finally the son decided to study them as well. They were definitely there in Africa 3.5 million years ago, 4 million years ago, and they survived there for more than 1 million years. They never left Africa. They never learned to make tools or use fire, but they did walk upright. Are they related to us? That's the big question. We're not sure if they were related to us or if they were some sort of biological dead end. We are Homo sapiens, so we belong to genus Homo. They belong to a different genus Australopithecus. It's possible that the first of genus Homo, which we'll take a look at, Homo habilis, came from Australopithecines. We're not sure. And until the more evidence comes in, we can't come to a conclusion about that. But we are pretty sure about the early genus Homo. The first one is Homo habilis. Now, Homo habilis appeared on the planet about 2 million years ago. What did it look like? Well, let's take a look. This is Homo habilis. You can see that it's losing the eyebrow ridges. The jaw is moving backwards. The head doesn't slope as much, allowing for a larger brain. Homo habilis is famous for the first human to make fire. And since it could make fire, it learned how to cook food. Cooking food kills bacteria and other things that can be harmful to the body. Makes the food easier to digest, giving Homo habilis probably a longer lifespan than Australopithecines. So first we have Australopithecines, then we have Homo habilis. Homo habilis. Next type of human to appear is very important to remember too, and that is Homo erectus. Homo erectus. This is what Homo erectus looked like. Starting to look more like us. It's losing the eyebrow ridges. It's losing the jutting jaw. It has a larger brain than Homo habilis. And most importantly, it's the first hominid to leave Africa. Homo erectus is the first hominid to leave Africa. It learned to make tools. Now, why did the coloration of the skin change when people left Africa? People always ask me about that. So that's real simple to answer. In Africa, nature's protection against the sunlight, getting skin cancer, is dark skin. So if you have lighter skin in Africa as a human, you would die out. You'd get skin cancer and all kinds of other diseases associated with UV light. Then when the humans left Africa, they went into cloudier parts of the planet, such as Europe and Asia. If you are in a cloudier climates where the sun isn't beating down on you, lighter skin is an advantage. Why? Because if you have darker skin and you lived in cloudy areas in prehistoric times, you would die of a disease called rickets. Lighter skin allows for the body to produce more vitamin D, even in low sunlight. And so it becomes an advantage when you live in cloudier parts of the world, such as Europe and Asia. Homo erectus left Africa 1.9 million years ago, and it made much more sophisticated tools. As you can see here, look at all these tools. It's really interesting. Spearheads, tools for making clothing, tools for scraping meat, butchering meat. These are all made by Homo erectus. Homo erectus conquered Europe, conquered Asia, conquered the Middle East. The only place it did not go was Polynesia. That means the Australia, Indonesia, the Philippines, those islands. But it did make it to Europe and Asia, and it made it into North America. But it died out. Different people say different times, but probably about 1 million years ago. Maybe some of them hung on until 800 or 500,000 years ago. Homo erectus left first. The next wave of hominids to leave Africa left 500,000 years ago. They are called the Neanderthals. You saw these earlier on in class. You can see a Neanderthal. Now, what makes them different than us, Homo sapiens? Let's look at the skeleton. You had a Neanderthal skeleton in one of your lab assignments, and most of you got it right. Let's compare the Neanderthal skeleton here on the left with our skeleton here, Homo sapiens. Notice that the Neanderthal is smaller in size, but its bones are much thicker. These were much stronger than us. Their forearms and their legs were very thick. They were extremely strong individuals. Their brain size is about the same as ours, sometimes a little bit larger. Let's take a look and see what they look like. They have these huge nasal passages and these large noses. And that's perfect for the Ice Age, the Pleistocene. So they're adapted to cold weather. Thick bones. Neanderthals, we used to think they were stupid. In the 50s and 60s, they used to have these movies showing them as being these stupid brutes. But now we know that they were not as stupid as we thought. In fact, they developed all kinds of much more advanced tools than Homo erectus. The spear points, the prized possession of any male Neanderthal was a big spear, and I'll show you what it looked like. They had tools for fishing. They had tools for little knives. They made jewelry. They had tools for making clothing. Let's take a look at Neanderthals' jewelry. Here you can see the kinds of things that Neanderthals wore. They put holes in shells and they would wear them. They wore necklaces. They also have the females had makeup kits, believe it or not. We find evidence that, and the males would paint also when they were going to war, we think. But we find traces of coloration in these shells that are pigments and indicate that they sometimes used makeup. But the prized possession of a Neanderthal male was a spear. Let's take a look at the spear of a Neanderthal. This, let me see if I get a good picture of it. Okay, this is a Neanderthal spear. Look how big it is. It's not made for throwing. It's made for stabbing. So when they wanted to attack an animal like a mammoth or a deer or anything they wanted to attack, they would try and lay in ambush these large animals. Maybe a couple Neanderthals would scare the large animal so that it would go past another group of Neanderthals who would thrust out with these spears and stab those animals. Another thing that makes them different than us is their diet was almost 100% meat. They relied on killing big mammals to survive. Of course, they would catch fish and lizards and anything they could eat. Another thing that indicates they were not as dumb as we thought they were is they buried flowers with their dead, meaning they cared for their dead. We see their bodies carefully laid out. and flowers dropped on top. They probably had some kind of language because they have the same bone in their throat that we do that allows for speaking. They died out because of Homo sapiens, our ancestors. They conquered Europe and Asia. They were adapted to the cold weather. And then they met their match, Homo sapiens. But before I go into that, Homo sapiens, um, the question has always been, is the human race related to Neanderthals? Well, we've sequenced the entire genetic code of a Neanderthal from bones in Eastern Europe. So we compared that to modern humans, and what do we find? All humans who have ancestors who have left Africa have between 2 and 5% Neanderthal DNA. We used to think maybe Homo sapiens, us, wiped out the Neanderthals. And the reason why we used to think that is because wherever the Neanderthals were, when they came into contact with Homo sapiens, they would be gone later. And there'd be spear points in their body. Their bones would be broken. And obviously that happened to an extent. Homo sapiens wiped out the Neanderthals. But then we found skeletons of children that were half Neanderthal and half human. And that must mean that just like the Vikings, some of our ancestors wiped out various Neanderthal clans and found some of the females attracted and mated with them, producing half human, half Neanderthals. And that evidence is borne out by the DNA. Everybody who has ancestors that left Africa has between 2 to 5% DNA Neanderthal. If you're pure African, you don't have any Neanderthal because you didn't meet the Neanderthals. Because the Neanderthals left Africa 500,000 years ago, and Homo sapiens left Africa 100,000 years ago. When Homo sapiens left Africa, they came into contact with the Neanderthals, wiped them out mostly, but mated with them. Why did we win over the Neanderthals? Well, I'll show you the main reason that most people think. Ancient Homo sapiens is called Cro-Magnon man. Let's compare the spears of our ancestors versus the Neanderthals. Notice that the Neanderthal spear is huge, and it's made for thrusting. You have to get within a foot or two of your opponent and stab him. But our ancestors developed the throwing spear. I think that was the big advantage. We killed them from a distance. Many people think that we had a more complex language as well. We weren't more intelligent than them. We have the same brain size. We simply were lucky enough to develop the throwing spear first. Turns out that I took a DNA test and I've got about a lot of Neanderthal in me for some reason, 3.6% through 23andMe. So if you do a Ancestry.com or 23, you can figure out how much Neanderthal you have in you. But who has the most Neanderthal in them? Redheads. Many scientists think that red hair came from the Neanderthals. It didn't exist in the human race until humans bred with the Neanderthals. In fact, most Neanderthals were probably redheads. After our ancestors came in contact with the Neanderthals, we left Africa about 100,000 years ago. They left 500,000 years ago. So they were already in Europe and Asia and had conquered the world, so to speak. Then our ancestors came along and wiped them out and also bred with them. Here's Australopithecines, one of the earlier prime hominids we talked about. And Australopithecines is the earliest hominid that we know about. And let me show you something quite interesting. We find footprints of Australopithecines, and we found males walking with a female, walking with a child. That is something very characteristic about hominids. They form, the males and females form bonds, they form couples, and they have a child, and they make a family. So early families we can see preserved in these footprints from Australopithecines. Very interesting. Australopithecine skull with a jutting jaw, the eyebrow ridges, smaller brain. Then we belong to what genus? We belong to Homo. The first one we talked about is Homo habilis, who never left Africa. Here's Homo habilis. Here's a Homo habilis skull. Then we move to Homo erectus, the first type of hominid to leave Africa, about 1.9 million years ago. Here's Homo erectus. They made tools, they made fires, they made primitive clothing. They had spears. They hadn't developed the throwing spear yet. Get to the Neanderthals, the second type of hominid to leave Africa. It's got a dome-like skull. It's different than our skull. Huge nasal passages. Neanderthals were more massive and muscular than modern humans. Shorter limbs, adapted to cold weather. Neanderthal DNA also has genes for red hair and light skin. So those who mated with Neanderthals probably got lighter skin and redder hair. Neanderthals conquered Europe and Asia, forming small communities. They cooked food, probably had a language, had makeup kits, went fishing, hunted with their big spears. Their bodies were made for cold weather until they met Cro-Magnon man, ancient Homo sapiens. We developed the throwing spear, probably had better verbal communication. But there's something special about Homo sapiens, our species, that none of the other hominids could do. We make art. Neanderthals, there's no evidence that Neanderthals could make art. Homo erectus couldn't make art. Homo habilis could not make art. It's something only humans, modern humans, Homo sapiens, can do. And ancient Homo sapiens is Cro-Magnon man. Our ancestors were Cro-Magnon man. They lived in the caves after they wiped out the Neanderthals. Another thing that only Homo sapiens can do is make music. Music and art. That's what Homo sapiens is, the only species that can do that. The Ice Age ended 11,700 years ago. By then, the Neanderthals were gone. And when the Earth started to warm up 11,700 years ago, we left the caves. Over the next couple thousand years, we formed small communities. And we started a big change. We changed from being hunter-gatherers to farmers. We raised animals for slaughter instead of going hunting. We planted crops. We formed larger communities. And as these communities became larger, they would become communicate a little bit outside their area, but something big happened 5,000 years ago. And I can't find a historian who can explain this to me. I really want to know, but 5,000 years ago, for some strange reason, Homo sapiens started to write things down. They started to write things down in China, Japan, Mesopotamia, Italy, what, Egypt. What caused people all of a sudden, all these, in India too, all these places, they started to write things down. I can't explain it, but once people started to write things down, that's the end of historical geology and the beginning of another field of a field called history. Historical geology ends with the writing down of things, and that's the end of the class. And I hope you get ready for the final.